Maya Clarke stood frozen in her dim apartment as her trembling fingers clutched the folded court letter that had arrived without warning. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "This can't be real." Ethan wouldn't dare. Yet the words on the paper struck harder than any blade, declaring she was unfit to remain guardian of her late sister's child. The silence roared in her ears, broken only by the thundering beat of her own pulse. Memories of promises whispered in the hospital corridor clawed at her, each one unraveling as betrayal seeped in. The walls seemed to close in, suffocating her as tears blurred the inked letters. "You've already taken enough," she said under her breath, her voice brittle with rage. Grief twisted into fury, and fury twisted back into despair. This moment fractured her world in two, leaving her soul torn between collapse and defiance. The paper shook in her hands, and in its weight lay the first stone of a war she never asked to fight. Maya sat rigid in silence, her gaze fixed on the fallen letter as the rain outside hammered like war drums. Her heart pounded against her ribs as she whispered, "How could you strip away the only family I have left?" Shadows flickered across her face, whispering reminders of Ethan Ward's cruelty. She remembered his sharp words the day of her sister's funeral, words that had felt like poison then, but now carried venomous truth. She pressed her palms against her temples, a desperate attempt to silence the storm raging within. The ache was unbearable, the air thick with suffocating despair, yet beneath it flickered a fragile spark of defiance. For in the cruel silence, she realized her soul would either break or fight. The choice weighed heavily, but the clock of fate had already begun its relentless ticking. Maya's phone buzzed violently against the wooden table, its shrill tone piercing the suffocating silence. She flinched, grabbing it with trembling fingers, and saw Jordan Reyes' name glow on the cracked screen. She answered, voice breaking, "They're taking her away." The words felt foreign, as though someone else had spoken them. Jordan's steady tone came through, anchoring her storm. Maya breathed. "We'll fight this together." His loyalty was a lifeline, yet her heart recoiled, afraid to believe anyone could hold her shattered world steady. Her reflection in the darkened window stared back hollow-eyed, whispering doubts she could not silence. She closed her eyes, forcing air into her lungs, but the storm inside refused to settle. She knew Ethan's shadow loomed larger now, and this was only the beginning. The rain eased into a steady drizzle, but inside Maya's chest the storm raged unbroken. She walked slowly toward the window, pressing her palm against the cold glass, her voice trembling as she whispered, "You promised me, Lila. You promised healing." Memories of her mentor's calm voice echoed, urging her to trust in time, yet time now felt like her enemy. She remembered Dr. Lila Brooks telling her once, "Pain doesn't vanish, Maya, but you can reshape it." Yet the words felt hollow now, drowned beneath betrayal. Her reflection was a ghost staring back at her, fragile and fading. The letter's sharp edges glared from the table, a reminder of war she had never chosen, yet one she would be forced to fight. The night clung heavy, sealing her fate with silence. Maya sank into the worn chair by the table, her hands resting heavily on her knees as exhaustion spread through her bones. Her whisper cracked like glass, "If this is war, then I have nothing left to lose." Her sister's smile from the photo glimmered on the table, piercing her heart like 1,000 knives. Every memory of laughter and promises came flooding back, clashing violently against the cold words of the legal notice. She felt the edges of her grief sharpen into defiance, a fragile shield against the darkness that threatened to consume her. "You will not win, Ethan," she muttered, the words trembling but carrying the first spark of resolve. She wiped her tears with the back of her hand, rising with unsteady strength. This was the moment her soul split, one half broken, the other bracing for the fight to come. Maya stood in the courthouse lobby, the marble floors echoing each step like a haunting drumbeat. She clutched the thin folder of papers to her chest, whispering, "You won't break me." Across the hall, Ethan Ward's sharp eyes locked onto hers, his smirk carrying the venom of old grudges. Ethan, tall and polished, exuded the arrogance of someone convinced of victory. "Maya," he said coolly, You've never been fit for responsibility." His words cut through the sterile silence like shards of glass. She fought to steady her breathing, anger swelling but fear gnawing beneath the surface. Her confidant Jordan lingered near the doorway, a steady presence, ready if she faltered. But the suffocating weight of Ethan's shadow reminded her that this battle was far from fair. Her soul quivered on the edge of despair, torn between collapse and the will to fight. As Maya stepped outside the courthouse, the gray sky mirrored her turmoil. Jordan caught her arm gently and said, "Don't let him crawl into your head, he thrives on it." She pulled away, voice shaking. "He's already in my blood, Jordan. He knows where my wounds bleed deepest." The drizzle kissed her skin like icy reminders, each drop seeping into her bones. Ethan's shadow lingered even though he was gone, his smirk echoing in her mind like a curse. Jordan's eyes softened, his tone steady. "You're stronger than he'll ever believe." Her chest tightened, torn between clinging to his faith and drowning in her doubt. The city lights flickered on, fragile sparks in the gloom, as she realized her battle was only beginning. Later that night, Maya sat across from Dr. Lila Brooks in her modest office, the shelves heavy with books on grief and healing. Lila's calm presence filled the room, her eyes warm with unspoken understanding. "Maya," Lila said softly, "Ethan is not your truth, he is your trial." The words lingered like balm, yet Maya shook her head, replying, "But trials still leave scars. What if I fail again?" Her voice cracked under the weight of doubt. The ticking clock behind Lila's desk echoed the fragility of every moment. Lila leaned forward, her tone steady. "Scars are proof you survived, not proof you're broken." Maya's eyes brimmed with tears as her defenses crumbled. She wanted to believe, but fear still clung like a second skin, reminding her that even wisdom could not silence old wound. Maya left the office with words echoing in her chest, but Ethan's shadow met her at every turn. As she walked through the dim street, his voice replayed cruelly in her mind. "You'll never be enough." Each word scraped against her ribs, louder than the rain. She pressed her coat tighter, whispering to herself, "I will not break." Yet even as she said it, her body trembled, fear rising like smoke from old fires. The neon glow of a diner sign flickered nearby, offering brief warmth against the night's chill. But no light could erase the image of Ethan's cold eyes or the suffocating weight of his power. For Maya, every step forward felt like walking deeper into an endless storm, her heart torn between surrender and survival. Back in her apartment, Maya sank onto the couch, her hands gripping the photo of her sister and child, as though it were a lifeline. She whispered, "I can't lose her too." The shadows stretched long across the walls, pressing in until she felt caged. Ethan's words, Lila's wisdom, and Jordan's encouragement tangled into a storm that refused to settle. Her chest rose in uneven breaths, torn between surrender and resistance. She pressed the photo to her heart, eyes wet with tears, voice breaking. "If I fall, she falls too." In that moment, the fire of defiance flickered again, fragile but real. Her soul was raw and weary, yet it refused to bow. The night pressed heavy outside, but within, a spark began to glow against the darkness. Maya sat across from Jordan in the dim cafe, the scent of burnt coffee clinging to the stale air. She whispered, "He wants to erase me, Jordan, piece by piece." Jordan leaned closer, his eyes steady but lined with worry. "He doesn't get to decide who you are." She wanted to believe him, yet the weight of Ethan's cruelty pressed harder than his words could lift. Her hands trembled as she stirred her untouched drink, the spoon clinking like a metronome of dread. A couple nearby laughed, the sound foreign to her storm. Maya's chest tightened as she muttered, "If I can't protect her, then what's left of me?" Jordan's jaw clenched, his loyalty burning. "Then we fight, Maya, even if it tears us apart." His certainty collided with her fear, leaving the table heavy with silence and unspoken pain. That night, Maya found herself staring at Ethan's message glowing on her phone screen. His words dripped with venom. "You will lose everything." She dropped the phone on the table as though it burned her skin. The apartment's silence roared, broken only by the rain hammering the window. She whispered, He knows every crack in me. The framed photo of her niece smiled back, twisting the knife of fear deeper. Maya pressed her fists to her chest, her voice trembling. I can't let him win. Yet her reflection in the window showed hollow eyes, doubt carved deep in every line. Ethan's shadow filled the room, though he was not there, his presence poisoning even her breath. She closed her eyes, praying for a strength she wasn't sure she possessed, a strength that could hold when every bond threatened to break. Maya met the eyes of Ethan across the courtroom again, his smug confidence radiating like poison. He leaned toward his attorney, whispering something before flashing her a grin that made her skin crawl. Pulse raced, fury tangled with fear. She gripped the folder tightly, whispering to herself, not this time. But doubt clawed back, whispering that his power was greater than her resolve. Jordan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, silent yet steady, grounding her for a fleeting moment. Ethan rose, straightening his suit with deliberate arrogance, and their eyes locked. For a heartbeat, Maya saw not the polished man, but the shadow of a boy twisted by bitterness. Yet it didn't lessen the ache. If anything, it sharpened the cruelty he carried now. Her soul burned with the desperate knowledge that every choice now meant everything. Later, Maya stumbled into the city streets, her chest heavy, her spirit fraying. The neon signs blinked overhead like indifferent eyes, casting fractured colors across wet asphalt. She leaned against a wall, whispering, I can't carry this alone. A stranger paused, a woman with sharp eyes and bold voice saying, You don't look like someone who quits. Maya blinked in surprise, meeting the stranger's unwavering gaze. The words stung and soothed at once, sparking something buried deep. I'm not a quitter, Maya muttered, though her voice cracked under the weight. The stranger smirked, shaking her head, then stopped, letting him write your story. With that, she walked away, leaving Maya trembling but oddly steadier. The echo of those words rang louder than the rain, igniting a fragile defiance Maya hadn't felt in years. Back at her apartment, Maya sat on the floor, the stranger's words echoing in her head. She whispered, Stop letting him write your story. Her hand hovered above the framed photo of her sister, trembling, before finally grasping it tight. She pressed it against her heart, whispering, I won't lose her. The silence of the room shifted, no longer suffocating but heavy with resolve. Jordan's words, Lila's guidance, and even a stranger's defiance braided into a fragile rope, pulling her forward. The fear still clung like a shadow, but beneath it, her fire stirred. She knew Ethan would not stop, but neither would she. In that fragile moment, her fractured soul began to knit itself back together, not whole yet, but strong enough to face the storm. Her whispered vow echoed into the night. You don't own me, Ethan. Maya sat across from Lila in the quiet office, the rain outside muted, as if the world itself held its breath. Lila leaned forward, voice firm yet gentle. There's something you must know about Ethan. Maya's pulse quickened, her eyes narrowing. What truth could possibly justify the hell he's caused? Lila hesitated, pain etched across her face before saying, He carries scars too, scars buried in your sister's choices. Maya froze, her mind fracturing at the thought that betrayal ran deeper than Ethan alone. The photo of her sister flashed in her mind, once a beacon of love, now a source of tangled shadows. No, Maya whispered, though her trembling voice betrayed her doubt. The silence pressed heavy, truth clawing at her heart, and the certainty of everything she knew began to unravel. Maya stormed into her apartment, the door slamming against the wall, her chest heaving. She paced the small living room, muttering, She lied to me. My own sister kept this from me. Her voice cracked with disbelief. The betrayal felt heavier now, not just Ethan's cruelty, but her sister's silence, a silence that rewrote their bond. She grabbed the framed photo, staring at her sister's smile, until her vision blurred. Why didn't you tell me the truth? She shouted at the empty room. The silence mocked her, thick with ghosts that refused to answer. She dropped into the chair, her body folding under the weight, as though the walls themselves had betrayed her trust. This was more than war. It was a fracture in her very soul. At dawn, Maya confronted Ethan in the courthouse parking lot, the sky streaked with bruised gray. Her voice shook with fury. "You used her secrets to destroy me." Ethan turned slowly, his smile faint but bitter. "You think I enjoyed this?" His eyes, for a fleeting second, carried a grief she had never seen. "She lied to both of us, Maya," he said, tone sharp yet fractured. The words rattled inside her, stirring a storm of rage and reluctant recognition. "You wanted revenge, not justice," Maya hissed, fists clenched at her sides. Ethan's jaw tightened, his silence screaming louder than words. The weight of his pain mirrored hers, though twisted, and the truth threatened to shatter her resolve. For the first time, she saw the shadow behind his cruelty. Maya sat with Jordan that evening, in his cluttered apartment, exhaustion painted across her face. She whispered, "He's not just the villain, Jordan. He's broken too." Jordan's brow furrowed, his voice steady. "Broken doesn't excuse cruelty." She nodded, but her chest twisted with unease. "What if everything I believed about my sister isn't true?" she asked, her voice trembling. Jordan leaned closer, his tone firm. "Then you face the truth, not run from it." His loyalty grounded her, yet the weight of the revelation pressed hard. She wanted to scream, to silence the storm, but instead she sank into the couch, whispering, "I don't know if I can bear it." Jordan placed a hand over hers, the silence heavy, but his presence unwavering. That night, Maya stood at her window, the city's glow flickering against the rain-streaked glass. She whispered, "I thought my sister's love was my anchor, but even anchors can drag you under." The weight of revelation pressed deep, yet in its ache lay clarity. She pressed her hand flat against the cold glass, her reflection fractured in droplets. Ethan was no longer just an enemy. He was a mirror of wounds she never saw, and her sister's silence was no longer protection, but a prison. Her voice hardened, whispering, "I will not drown in their secrets." The night hummed with quiet defiance, the storm within shifting. In the darkness, Maya's fractured heart began to reshape itself, no longer bound by illusions, but by the raw truth she was finally willing to face. Maya walked into the courtroom again, her body heavy with dread. Every step felt like dragging chains across the polished floor. Ethan sat smug at the opposing table, his gaze piercing her like daggers. She clenched her fists, whispering to herself, "Hold on, don't break now." The judge's voice echoed like thunder, words sharp and sterile. Maya's chest tightened, and for a moment, her vision blurred with panic. Jordan leaned close, whispering, "Focus on her, not him," reminding her of the child whose fate hung in the balance. Ethan's smirk widened, feeding off her cracks, as though her pain was his weapon. Her knees trembled, but her soul burned with defiance. She would not collapse here. Every beat of her heart screamed that this fight was her only chance to protect the little life tethering her broken world together. That evening, Maya sat alone in her apartment, the silence unbearable. She clutched her niece's stuffed toy to her chest, rocking slightly as though cradling the child herself. Tears streamed freely, her whisper cracking, "I can't lose her." The photo of her sister stared back, mocking her with the weight of secrets. "You lied to me," she sobbed, pressing her forehead to the toy. Every wall around her felt closer, suffocating, threatening to crush what remained of her strength. But even as despair hollowed her chest, a spark flickered in the pain. "If I have to burn myself to ash," she muttered, "I'll still fight him." The words were weak yet true, her vow reshaping the silence into fragile resolve. The night wrapped her in grief, but within that grief, a weapon began to form. Maya met with Lila again, her hands trembling as she clutched a notebook filled with scattered thoughts. "I don't know what's real anymore," she admitted, her voice hoarse. Lila's gaze was calm but sorrowful. "Truth isn't always clean, Maya, but strength comes from facing it anyway." Maya slammed the notebook shut, whispering sharply, "Facing it feels like drowning." Lila leaned forward, her tone steady, then learned to breathe in the storm. The words echoed, weaving with her pain, forcing her to confront that survival was not about escape but endurance. Tears burned in her eyes, yet her jaw tightened with something sharper than grief. "I can't fail her," Maya whispered. In that moment, the weight shifted slightly, not gone but carried with fragile defiance. Lila nodded softly, as though seeing a fire reigniting. On the rooftop of her building, Maya stood under the night sky, the city lights glowing faintly beneath the blanket of stars. The wind tugged at her coat as if testing her strength. She whispered into the open air, "I am not my sister's lies. I am not Ethan's cruelty." Her voice cracked but carried into the night, sharp as a blade against silence. For a moment, she felt weightless, suspended between collapse and resilience. The city stretched below her, endless and unforgiving, yet within her chest burned a fragile defiance. "I will protect her," she vowed to the stars, her words trembling yet unyielding. The wind answered with a sharp gust, chilling her bones but igniting her resolve. This was no longer about survival. It was about reclaiming her story from the shadows trying to consume it. Back in court the next day, Maya faced Ethan again, her body still trembling but her spirit unbroken. The judge's words cut sharp. Custody will be determined by the evidence, not emotion. Maya's chest tightened, but she held her head high. Ethan smirked, whispering across the table, "This ends with you shattered." Maya met his gaze, her whisper steady, "Not this time." The air between them crackled with the weight of years, secrets and scars. Jordan squeezed her shoulder gently, grounding her in silence. Every eye in the room felt heavy, but she no longer hid beneath fear. For the first time, her voice carried the fire of someone who had already walked through ruin and chosen to rise. Whatever the outcome, Maya knew her fight had only just begun. Maya stood in the courtroom, her breath shallow, the walls pressing in like a cage. The judge's gavel struck, echoing through her bones. Ethan rose, his voice cutting sharp, "She cannot be trusted with a child's future." His words hung like poison in the air. Maya's hands trembled, but she lifted her chin, whispering, "I will not let you erase me." Jordan's steady hand rested on her shoulder, grounding her, while the photo of her niece peeked from her folder, a fragile shield of love. Ethan's glare burned into her soul, daring her to falter. The silence stretched, and every heartbeat felt like a hammer cracking open her chest. In this moment, surrender or defiance would decide everything. Her voice wavered but did not break, carrying the weight of both her grief and her fire. Later that evening, Maya collapsed onto the floor of her apartment, her body shaking with sobs she could no longer contain. She whispered, "He'll take everything, and I'll be nothing." The framed photo slipped from her hands, clattering against the wood. She curled into herself, pulling her knees close, fighting the crushing weight of despair. Shadows stretched across the room like dark fingers tightening around her. For a moment, she considered surrender, letting Ethan's shadow consume her. But then, through the fog of grief, her niece's laughter echoed in memory, bright and unbroken. Her chest heaved as she gasped, "I have to stand for her." The words trembled, but rooted deep. Even in the suffocating dark, defiance sparked again, fragile but unyielding, daring despair to break her fully. The next day, Maya stood before Lila, her face pale but her eyes burning. "I can't breathe in this storm," she admitted, voice trembling. Lila nodded softly, "Then stop fighting the storm, let it shape you." Maya clenched her fists, whispering, "If I let it shape me, what if I'm nothing when it's done?" Lila leaned closer, her tone firm, "You'll be the fire that survives the rain." The words pierced her doubts, planting a seed of strength. Maya inhaled sharply, her chest rising as if reclaiming air she had lost for years. She whispered, "Then I won't let him take what's left of me." Lila smiled faintly, as though she saw the woman Maya was becoming. In that fragile moment, defiance bloomed into something stronger, resolve. On the courthouse steps, Ethan cornered her, his words sharp as blades. "You'll never escape me, Maya," he hissed, eyes burning with cold fury. She straightened, her voice low but steady, "You don't own me." The drizzle fell around them, blurring city lights into fractured colors. Ethan's jaw tightened, his mask slipping to reveal exhaustion beneath the rage. "You'll regret this," he muttered, but his voice cracked, betraying fractures in his armor. Maya's gaze held his, unwavering for the first time. "The only thing I regret is letting you believe you still had power over me," she said. For a moment, silence reigned, the storm outside a mirror of the storm between them. Her words cut through his shadow, and for the first time, she felt stronger than his grip. That night, Maya returned to her apartment, her body weary, but her spirit transformed. She stood before the window, the city glowing beneath her, reflections fractured across the rain-streaked glass. She whispered, "I will not surrender. Not to Ethan, not to fear, not even to the truth that broke me." Her chest rose with each vow, her voice sharpening with resolve. The shadows no longer pressed as heavy. Instead, they bowed to the fire flickering within her. She pressed the photo of her niece to her chest, whispering, "For you, I will endure." Tears glistened, but they no longer carried despair. They carried strength. The night outside hummed with quiet power, as though the city itself bore witness to her rebirth. The breaking point had come, and she had not broken. She had risen. The courtroom fell into silence as the judge delivered the ruling. The words blurred in Maya's ears, but the tone carried finality. Her chest tightened as she clutched the folder, whispering, "Please let this end." Ethan's gaze bore into her, his smug mask cracking into something unreadable. The decision was not a victory or a loss. It was a compromise that cut both ways. Maya felt hollow, yet relief flickered, fragile as a candle in wind. Jordan's hand steadied her trembling fingers, and she whispered, "We survived this storm." Her tears fell silently, not of defeat but of release. The battle had reshaped her, stripping illusions and leaving raw truth. For the first time, she stood not as a broken woman, but as someone who had faced fire and endured its heat. Outside the courthouse, Maya stepped into the daylight, the drizzle gone, replaced by a fragile warmth breaking through the clouds. She lifted her face to the sky, whispering, "It's over." Jordan walked beside her, silent but steadfast. Ethan lingered on the steps behind, his shadow no longer towering, but fading into the background. Maya's breath came steadier now, though her heart still ached with scars. She knew there was no perfect justice, no clean healing, only survival and choice. "I'm not the same woman who walked in here," she murmured. The city hummed around her, alive, reminding her that the world kept moving no matter the battles fought inside its walls. In that fleeting light, she felt both small and infinite, broken and whole all at once. That evening, Maya sat in Jordan's apartment, a warm cup of tea in her hands. The quiet felt foreign after weeks of chaos. She whispered, "I thought I'd feel empty, but I feel lighter." Jordan smiled faintly, replying, "That's because you carried a storm and survived it." His words sank deep, and for the first time she allowed herself to breathe without fear. Her niece's photo rested on the table, glowing in the lamplight like a promise. Maya's chest filled with bittersweet ache, knowing scars would remain but no longer control her. She whispered, "I'm not healed, but I'm no longer bleeding." The silence between them was tender, heavy with unspoken care. In that stillness, she realized survival was not the end. It was the beginning of something fragile but real. Later, Maya stood at her sister's grave, the air still, the sky painted in fading twilight. She placed the photo of her niece at the base of the headstone, whispering, "You should have trusted me." Her voice trembled but carried no anger, only ache. She knelt, pressing her palm to the cold stone, tears sliding silently. "I can't forgive your silence, but I'll carry your love," she said softly. The cemetery stretched quiet around her, shadows long against the grass. A fragile breeze stirred, carrying away the heaviness in her chest. She rose slowly, her body heavy, but her spirit lighter. Her sister's silence no longer chained her. It shaped her into someone stronger. In that farewell, grief transformed into something new, acceptance. That night, Maya sat by her apartment window, the city glowing with scattered lights. She whispered, "The pain is still here, but it no longer owns me." Her reflection in the rain-speckled glass looked back not hollow, but whole. She pressed the framed photo to her chest, her voice breaking. For her, I will keep going. The silence wrapped around her like a blanket, no longer suffocating but protective. Her eyes closed, and for the first time, she allowed herself to rest without fear. Outside, the city pulsed with life, unaware of her battles, but she knew her soul had shifted. The final truth settled deep: brokenness and strength could live side by side. In the stillness, Maya found peace, fragile yet profound. The storm was over, and she had survived.